Episode 59 is underway, and let's get right into it because we have yet another special episode for episode 59 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. And yet again, I love going back in time and just reconnecting with some of the greatest players to play in the state of West Virginia. And man, do we have a great one today. My guest, for however you may be listening or watching, because we are now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, along with you can subscribe to me on YouTube by just looking up Hoops Across the Mountain State. But my guest for episode 59, as a senior at Greenbrier East High School. Now, get your listening ears on because this is gonna blow you away. May knock your socks off, as some people like to say. But he averaged 25 points a game as a senior in his senior year at Greenbrier East. For his career in 75 games, he averaged 1,902 points at Greenbrier East in his prep career. How about that? That ranks up third among 3-year high schools. Back then, people weren't able to play as a freshman, because obviously he had the freshman team as well. But from his sophomore year to his senior year, he racked up 1,900 career points for Greenbrier East. How about that? I mean, good night. But anyways, let's continue on. You know, just looking back as well, looking at whenever he led Greenbrier East to the state tournament, in 1 year, he helped lead Greenbrier East to a 25-1 record. And during that time, in 3 games, he scored 91 points and 47 rebounds. He was presented the Bill Evans Award as well in high school, and he was voted the Big All-State Team his junior and senior year, as well as making Class AAA All-State Team both years as a junior and senior. My guest also went on to have a historic career for the Mountaineers up here in Morgantown. He played from 1973 to 1976 under Coach Sonny Moran. And for his career, you thought his high school numbers were good. He said, okay, I'm going to almost repeat that. He played for the Mountaineers, and he racked up 1,556 career points and grabbed 1,070 rebounds. And he is the only player in school history to lead WVU in rebounding in each of his 4 seasons. How about that? But also, here's another tidbit that I found marvelous. I mean, this was just unreal. Him and Jerry West, yes, the logo, one of the greatest players of all time to wear the gold and blue. Him and Jerry West still rank as the only 2 players in school history to score more than 1,500 points and grab 1,000 rebounds. And wow, I'm excited for this episode, as I said earlier. As I said before, I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, if anybody knows the Charleston area, there's a peanut shop right across the street from the Kanawha County Public Library. And anytime I go to the library, my mom would be like, okay, let's go to the peanut shop. That's when I was just like, okay, let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Let's buckle in and let's welcome in our guest for episode 59 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Some people call him wonderful. I call him special. Welcome in Warren Baker. Warren, welcome to the program.
Hey, Taylor, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing tremendous. How are you doing today?
It's great. It's a Friday, and I'm just relaxing and enjoying life.
Absolutely. Well, how is life for you now that you've stepped aside from not only basketball, but we'll talk about all the other stuff that you did in your life post-basketball. What's been going on with you?
You know what? Been doing a lot of traveling. My wife and I have done quite a bit this summer, and have a couple more trips planned. But for the most part, just enjoying each other and doing some. You know, I haven't really retired because I have chores that I have to do around the house on a daily basis. So don't think that retirement's all that everybody says it is.
That's a good example. I think my dad said that to me a time or two. Maybe my mom as well. So, but let me ask you this: so where's your out of all the places you've traveled this summer, what's your favorite place that you visited this year?
Probably Las Vegas. My wife and I got married in Las Vegas, so we go back every summer with some very, very close friends and celebrate that. I'm looking forward to. We're going to Hilton Head next week, and I really, really like that. So I'm really, really all geared up for that as well. But probably Las Vegas, for the most part.
Okay, I like that. I like that answer. Never been to Las Vegas on the bucket list, so I'll hold you to that. But yeah, so for everybody that doesn't know how I like to do things on this podcast, I like to go in a lot of different directions. And with Warren, I'm really excited because, Warren played in an era where basketball was energetic. It was lively. People were enthused. I mean, as my dad always says, growing up, you could not find a place to play basketball on a basketball court because it was just polluted with people wanting to get better each and every day. And I understand that now because talking with guys like Warren, like we'll get into here in a second, and guys like Jim Miller, Keith Tyler, my dad, just guys like that, you just understand a little bit more about what basketball was like back then. So we'll go down that path. We'll also talk about his tenure with Greenbrier East as well, along with how he got to WVU, playing for Coach Moran. And then also, like I said, we'll touch on what he did post basketball as well. Well, Warren, I'll lead with this question. And that is, looking back at the time that you played high school basketball down in White Sulphur Springs, describe what basketball was like back then for you, but also back then for that community as well.
Well, you know what, Taylor? There were a lot of really, really good basketball players that came through White Sulphur, many that went on to the collegiate level and everything. And you know, you drive by basketball courts now, and they're just empty. There's nobody really playing. You know, every day the older guys would come get me after I finished eating dinner, and hey, let's go to the court. And that's all we did every day, played ball. And it's one of those things that you played so hard that because if you lost, you had to sit out maybe 3-4 games before you could get back on the court again. So it was really, really, really intense play. And again, I had a lot of guys that I played with that were really, really good basketball players, and that helped, I think, with my development.
When you look back at that, you brought up the playground aspect of your career. So looking back at that, did you always just walk up to the court and people would pick you up, or would you have a team pre-planned and you just say, okay, we're going at this time and let's go run the courts?
No, you just, you know, you went, you never really knew, you knew the court was going to be packed, but you never really knew who was there. So you just kind of waited to be picked up and you played. And after a while, when I got closer to my junior and senior year, there were 3 of us that played together all the time, and we'd go to the court about the same time and try to get on the same team. But for the most part, it was one of those things where you just went, and whoever picked you up, you played with them, and then you played hard because you didn't want to lose and have to sit out again.
Now, I could assume this. Did your knees ever get scraped up or whenever you would fall down on the pavement?
Yeah, well, the first court that we played on was a dirt and had sawdust on it. But yeah, we then once we started playing on asphalt, yes, I did. I had a few battle scars from that as well.
Oh, I love that. So let me ask you this. So looking back at that, what was your favorite memory from playing on the playground?
Getting beat up. And when I say getting beat up, those guys gave you no breaks. You know, it was one kind of no blood, no foul. You know, so you went out and you just played hard, and you know, you got used to being pounded on and knocked around. And yeah, you know, once you got into organized basketball, a lot of that stuff had to stop. But growing up, I really think it helped to be knocked around and beat up the way those guys did at that time.
Who were some people, you know, growing up that really pushed you to continue pursuing the game of basketball?
Well, as I said, you know, there were a number of Jackie Joe Robinson certainly was one that played at Glenville State. There was a young man named Johnny Swan that went to Miami of Ohio. There were Bob Manyweather went to Glenville State. There were just a ton of guys that played college basketball from that small community long before Greenbrier East was ever you know, made a consolidated school with all the rest of the communities. I've always said, had White Sulphur, Greenbrier East had been back there when I was growing up, I think they would have had a number of state championships just because of the players from the surrounding 5 communities that made up Greenbrier East.
Looking back at high school basketball, now just moving from a community, but now a much broader scale with the state of West Virginia as well, because again, you played in a time where basketball was alive and well in the state of West Virginia. I mean, everybody knows about the coal companies and everything else, but basketball was sort of right there. It was sort of a niche for people in West Virginia. What was it like just seeing these people across the state compete annually, and you got to compete against some of the greatest players in the state of West Virginia?
Yeah, it was. You know, for the size of the state, West Virginia had a ton of really, really good basketball players. I look at that Charleston High team. One of my teammates, Levi Phillips, played for them in high school, and boy, were they good. They were very. I mean, that was a college basketball team in high school. You know, and we did. The state was small, so you did get to see a lot of those really, really, really good players. And it was just neat to watch those guys mature as well and go on and see what they did after they left the high school ranks.
AAU wise, did you ever get involved with AAU?
No, there was no AAU back then. And Taylor, one of the things that I have to say, I kind of missed the fact that I didn't get an opportunity to do that. But I like the fact that a lot of us that were growing up played so many different sports. Anymore, it's once a person starts playing basketball, if that's what they're going to do, that's what they do year round. Well, I think I ran cross country in high school, for instance, and I thought that really, really helped with my conditioning and my endurance and those type of things. And a lot of kids I played with played football. They were all state in football, and I think those things, when you were able to play a lot of different sports, really, really helped out. So sometimes I think AAU gets in the way of kids being able to play multiple sports. So I kind of like the fact that it really wasn't around, because I still played the basketball that I wanted to play, but we also did other sports as well.
Going into high school, do you remember how tall you were and what you weighed going into high school?
You know what? I really had a growth spurt in junior high. I started in junior high school probably about 6'2". By the time I finished in the 7th grade, and then by the time I left in the 9th grade, I was about 6'6", 6'7". So I really had a big growth spurt there that really helped. And I was really fortunate to have really good coaches throughout my junior high and senior years. Both were military personnel, so it was going to be hard. It was a hard deal. You didn't go out there and just kind of mess around. They were very, very serious about the way that you went about the game.
That's interesting you bring that up, because not a lot of people, one went into the military and came back and coached basketball. And I find that fascinating about you and your story. And that is, what was that like? And you just mentioned very briefly about, just going through a practice with them. It was never easy, never a day off and stuff like that. Do you think that really ultimately helped you to continue to have this fire inside you just to get better every day?
Oh, I think so. I can remember one time that I made the varsity. I started on the varsity team in the 10th grade, and some of my buddies that I had come into the 10th grade with were on the JV team. And I happened to be daydreaming and looking down at the JV practice that was going on at the other end of the court. And my coach said, "Listen, why don't you just go down and join your buddies? You don't deserve to be here. You're not paying attention to what I'm doing here. So go down and play with those guys." And that got my attention right away. Hey, listen, you better listen to him, or that may be where you're. And he wasn't kidding about that. He just said, go down there and play with those guys. Now, I don't know if I'd have stayed down there, but he wasn't going to have any part of me not paying attention because I'm looking at my other buddies down the other end of the court.
Yeah, that'll do it to you.
Yeah, it will.
So let's talk about this. And I always find this interesting, just because the team aspect, along with the players, were just as equal. Team-wise, who are some teams that you can remember that always gave you all the biggest trouble?
Oh, without a doubt. I heard you say something about the Coalfields, Mullins. Mullins High School had a great coach, and Coach Don Knuckles, and he passed away a few years ago. But my roommate in college, Jerome Anderson, was from Mullins during the time, and Jerome was a year older than I was, so I only played against him 2 years, my sophomore and junior year, because when I was a senior, he was already at WVU. We never beat them in Mullins, but they never beat us at Greenbrier East. But it was always a dogfight. I mean, really. And you look forward to those games because you knew that you were going to get the best of him, and our team was going to go ahead and give them our best shot. But we wouldn't let them beat us in Greenbrier County, and we couldn't beat them down at Mullins.
Player-wise, who was one of those guys that every time you saw that you were playing that team and you knew that you were going to play him, you had a big circle on your calendar saying, okay, I'm going to go to war with that guy?
Mullins was there, but we played Charlestown in the Coliseum my junior year in the state tournament, and we lost to them. And they had a young man named Bill Lindsay, and Bill Lindsay should have been playing at WVU. He ended up going to Fairmont State and playing for legendary coach Joe Retton, but he should have been at WVU. That guy was a major Division I basketball player, and we ended up having to play those guys, and they were really, really good. That's a game that I will always remember, because that's the game, and some people will tell you that they were there, that an official tragically died on the floor during the game. Yeah, I was down there, and I just heard a big crack, and I looked down beside me, and the official had collapsed, and there were 1,000 different colors going through his face. They said he later died at the hospital, but the man died right there on the court. And that was, so the game was held up for probably 20, 25 minutes, sent both teams to the dressing room, and they said, well, we came back out, we finished the game, and they kept saying, both teams had to go through it, but I know it had a direct effect on my guy. I couldn't even concentrate after having seen that. That was really a terrible situation.
Wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, I have no words. I have no words for that, and that's just tragic to hear. But you had mentioned that you all played at the Coliseum, and the Coliseum opened 1970, and you guys were the state tournament used to play up in Morgantown frequently before moving down to Charleston. What was that like for you, just playing in the Coliseum in the state tournament just before you ultimately went to play at WVU?
Yeah, it was nice because obviously at that time, and it still is, one of the great places in the country to play basketball, and it was really neat for us to get the one thing that I think everybody, not just us at Greenbrier East, but anybody that went in there, was the depth perception. We were playing at used to playing in these small little band boxes everywhere, and you got out there, and this was this big, spacious place. So it really took a while to get used to the depth perception and playing in there. But it was a great thing at that particular time to be saying, yes, we're going to go play in that brand new building in Morgantown. It was a lot of fun.
During your high school career, recruiting wise, who were some teams that were interested in you?
I was very interested in Michigan State. I don't believe this. They had green uniforms. Michigan State was green, and Greenbrier East, we had green. That was the first thing that attracted me to Michigan State. But I was very interested in Clemson. I took a recruiting trip to Clemson, to Duke. Obviously, Virginia Tech was right in my backyard. Virginia Tech is from White Sulphur Springs. It was only about an hour and 15 minutes away. Marshall and Ohio University. That's where Bob Huggins, our current coach, that's where Bob started. So he and I would have been playing together had I gone to OU our freshman year. I don't know if we'd have both ended up in Morgantown, but I'm certainly glad he did. But those were some of the schools that I was very, very interested in.
You mentioned a lot of great schools, like you just mentioned Michigan State with the Jersey colors, and Clemson and Duke as well. But then here comes WVU. When does WVU first come into contact with you?
I met Coach Moran during the summer at basketball camps. I used to, over at Greenbrier Military, it was called GMS, Greenbrier Military School, they used to have a basketball camp over there, WVU camp. And I would go over there, and Lewisburg was only 8 miles from White Sulphur. So I would go there, and I knew Coach Moran and Coach Gary McPherson very well from those days at the camp. So from my ninth grade or my sophomore year on, I was in contact and knew about West Virginia. And I'd always been a big West Virginia fan anyway.
So what was that first meeting like for you between you and Coach Moran?
Really I really can't remember a lot about it other than, him welcoming us to the camp and that type of thing. And, there were some really, really good players, at the camp, but really not a whole lot. The recruiting really, really, really got started when I was like a junior in high school. And I would go up to Morgantown to see a game, and they would come to see us play as well. So it was kind of a thing where I knew him early on, but the actual recruiting and those type of things didn't really start till I was a junior.
You had mentioned that you attended this camp down in Lewisburg, and nowadays people have elite camps, individual camps, team camps for that matter. How important were those kind of camps for you, especially with recruiting going on?
Well, they were good, and yes, we didn't. I didn't go to any of what they would call elite camps, but there were always a lot of college players around. There was, Marshall's camp. Russell Lee was an All-American. Mike D'Antoni, who just finished coaching. I think he's going to get out of coaching now, but coached the Houston Rockets and a long time in the NBA. Those guys that were always around. So there was always good competition at the camp. I can't imagine having gone to camps like they have now and really running into guys any better than the guys I had to play against when I was at those camps.
So you get to Morgantown and you have your first practice with the Mountaineers. Your first thought when you first step onto that practice floor is what?
Can I play with these guys? And I went out and I got hit. I got the first practice, or not first practice, but the first day that we had a pickup game, I got hit in the mouth and chipped a tooth. And I said, "Well, boy, these guys are going to play a rough style of ball." But I think going back and I've already talked about this, growing up and playing with the guys I played against in White Sulphur had me toughened up to go up and be ready to go up against the guy that I played against. And then after it only took a while for me to say, yeah, I can play with these guys. So that was the beginning of saying, I think I made the right decision coming here. And I think, and the other thing that goes along with that too, Taylor, when I went to WVU, it was after a very, very, very tragic situation that happened the year before. The year before, Larry Harris from Charleston was killed in an automobile accident. Sam Oglesby, who played with the Mountaineers, was paralyzed in that car wreck. 3 guys graduated. One became ineligible because of academics. So when I went to West Virginia, we were totally, totally depleted. One of the players on the team the year before had a collapsed lung. We had another one that had a scratched cornea. So the coffers were basically empty when I went there. And that was one of the reasons why I was able to step right in. We had the second youngest team in the nation my freshman year. That was the first year the freshmen were allowed to play varsity basketball. We had 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen starting. It was either Arizona, because I was thinking about this the other day, it was either Arizona or Arizona State. They had 4 freshmen and 1 sophomore. So we were the second youngest team in the country. So it was learn on the fly, and get your socks beat off if you didn't.
I'm looking at this roster from your first season with the Mountaineers in 1973, and especially the West Virginia guys. So there were 6 guys, including yourself. So 5 other guys outside of you: Rick Coles, Mark Catlett, Jerome Anderson, Chris Springer, and then Larry Carr as well. All of you guys came from the Mountain State and played for the hometown university. And
Yes.
I want to talk about a guy separated from this pack, and that's Jerome Anderson. When you think about Jerome Anderson, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Jerome was the beginning of the big guard area. Jerome was about 6'5", but he ended up going to the Boston Celtics and playing for the Celtics. In fact, he was on a championship team there. But Jerome was just such a versatile player because I knew him from high school. And that was one of the reasons that I ended up coming to WVU too, because we were so close because we knew each other. Actually, we even played baseball against each other when we were 13. So I grew up watching his game, and I'll tell you how good he was. We played a game of horse one day, where you have to, guy makes a shot, you have to make it. We played a game of horse one day, and I didn't get the lead for 3 games. He actually made everything he threw up and beat me, and I never got. So I had the utmost respect for his game. But he was one of the first big guards and one of the first truly versatile players that could play, the guard position at 6'6", 6'7", or 6'6", which he was. So it was good to watch him, and it was always great to play with him.
I forgot to ask this question before we got into your Mountaineer discussion, and that is, prior to you committing to the Mountaineers and ultimately going up to Morgantown, was there ever a thought that you said, okay, with all these schools outside of West Virginia wanting me, I may go somewhere else and explore the world some more? Because as West Virginians, some people may not have different opportunities to go out and explore, the United States for that matter, or even the East Coast, because you had a lot of teams on the East Coast as well. But was there ever a thought that you may leave the state to go pursue collegiate basketball somewhere else?
Yeah, you know what, Taylor, I'll tell you this. The only reason I took the trip to Duke, there was a young man named Jim Lewis who had played at WVU, and Bucky Waters was a coach at WVU. He was the coach at Duke at that particular time. Tate Slock was the coach at Clemson, and he recruited the young man I met named Johnny Swan a while ago when he was at Miami of Ohio. So there were some connections that I had with people that were out of state, and that's basically the reason. But I don't think I would have ever gone any place else. Virginia Tech was attractive because it was about an hour and 15 minutes away, so family and friends would be able to get there to see you. But ultimately, Morgantown was the place that I decided I wanted to be, and I really wanted to come, stay in state, and because I did have a lot of roots here, and that was enough for me to say that. But I did really consider Clemson, and I don't know about Duke. I don't know academically whether I would ever made it at Duke, for goodness sakes. Duke was a tough school, but I went because of the connections with West Virginia.
That's fascinating. You brought up an interesting point with just the scholastic side of it as well, because I think nowadays people forget about the student athlete part, and you understood that. So I appreciate that aspect, just because as a former student athlete, I always thought about just athletics, but now as I grow more and more old, I guess you could say, I'm only 21. You start to understand that the student side of it as well is just as important. So I appreciate you pointing that out. But going through schedules now, when you look at some of these teams that you all played, you guys played the Pitt Panthers of the world, Penn States of the world, Virginia Techs of the world. First off, let's talk about Pitt, because we know that as Mountaineer people, you hate playing Pitt. What was that? What were those games like back then?
Very, very, very intense. Again, during my 4 years, we never won at Fitzgerald Fieldhouse in Pittsburgh, but they never came into the Coliseum and stole one either. So they were very intense games. But the funny thing about it, Taylor, is that since graduation and after playing with those guys the way we did, we really I did. I know I did. I got along really, really well with former Pitt players. I used to play against Tommy Richards all the time. He was a great player. My wife and I were in Las Vegas one time, and I saw a sign that said Keith Starr Insurance Agency. I said, that can't be the same Keith Starr that I played against in college. Well, she said, well, why don't you walk in? I walked in, and sure enough, it was Keith Starr. He and I sat down and talked for 2 hours. Had a great visit. And whenever I see the people, even now that I played against the Pitt, there's a very mutual respect, but we really get along. And a lot of times you wouldn't hear people say that about a former foe like Pitt was.
Another example, you are a class act. You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Well, thank you.
But going from the 74-75 season, amid your sophomore season, a coaching change occurs. Sonny Moran is gone. Insert Joedy Gardner. First impressions of Coach Gardner, what were they?
Well, Coach Gardner was a former Marine, a pilot, and he was a very, very intense guy. He came in and totally changed the way that we were doing things, and it was a very difficult adjustment. The guys that were there prior to him coming were used to a certain way of coaching, and he was totally different than that. And I think that did. I know it eventually affected me, because if you look at my minutes going into my junior or senior year, if you look at those final minutes, they weren't nearly what they were when I played my freshman and sophomore years. And again, a lot of that was because out of necessity, because of the depleted roster. But Coach Gardner brought in a lot of junior college players, and those guys played well, and our team was a little more balanced. So, a lot of our minutes went down as things went on, but it was a difficult transition.
Okay, so you mentioned, so let's go back real quick. And we talked about how you played in high school with some people that served in the armed forces, and you just mentioned how Coach Gardner did as well. Did that sort of help you get along with him off the court, or was there still the point where he was intense on and off the court?
No, I think that helped. I understood, I think, a lot of what he was doing, even though it was a tough adjustment. And it's always a tough adjustment when your minutes start going down and you can't really figure out why. But but yeah, I understood where he was coming from, but it was a different type of tough love than I had been used to before.
Nowadays, whenever there's a coaching change, student athletes usually run away from the program they initially started at and they go and follow that coach to wherever they go. Was there ever, or they may even leave for that matter, quite frankly, but was there ever a point in your mind that after Coach Moran left, that you were like, okay, I may just test the waters to see what's out there for me after you just had two great seasons to start your Mountaineer career?
No, no. And I've been asked that question before. In fact, I've told people, even if I had decided that I wasn't going to play basketball anymore, and I never really got to that point, I would have stayed at West Virginia. I enjoyed the school, and I had such good relations with my other teammates that I would have stayed at West Virginia. So I never really considered transferring or doing anything like that. I made a commitment to play at the school, and that's where I'm going to be, and that's where I'm going to get my degree.
A guy that got onto the scene the same season that Coach Gardner started coaching is, as we mentioned already, is Bob Huggins, who's now the head basketball coach of the Mountaineers. When Coach Hugs first got to Morgantown, what was that relationship like at first between the two of you?
Really good. Hugs and I have been, I mean, ever since he stepped on campus, I'll tell you how tough he was. We used to vote on the five toughest guys, the five best players that we played against the entire year. Might be somebody from Syracuse, might be somebody from Pitt, might be somebody from Villanova. The year that Hugs transferred in and had to sit out, we voted for four guys, and then he was also on that team because we had to play against him every day. The intensity, you see him on the sideline now. That was the same way. He's kind of mellowed out now, but he would absolutely beat you to death on the court, one way or the other. He would beat you with his basketball ability, which was very good, or he would physically beat you. And we had a very mutual respect for Hugs, and that's the way it is now. It still is. In fact, I just talked with him the other day, and it's the same thing. The thing I really like about Hugs is that sometimes he'll and I'll sit down. I'll be in his office or at his house or whatever, and we'll sit down for 2 hours and talk. And basketball may never come up. So that's the type of situation, type of relationship we have. And I followed him. My wife and I used to go to Akron when he was coaching at Akron. I went to Cincinnati numerous times, and it was always open arms, and that's the way the relationship is now.
So I love asking this question just from an aspect of people that either played with Hugs or even played for Hugs. So since you were able to play with Hugs, what's your favorite Bob Huggins story?
I've got a number of stories, some of which I can't talk about, but no, Hugs always hit your back. He really did. The story about he and B.B. Flannery, I don't know how much about that but he and B.B. Flannery from Duquesne got into it, and Joedy Gardner came up and told Hugs, "You're not going to go to Pittsburgh and we play Duquesne. We're not." Said, "We don't know what BB's dad might do." Well, B.B. Flannery's dad had a gun. So, Hugs says, no, I'm going to go play in the ball game, and I'm not going to worry about this guy. But Hugs was he always had your back. So you never worried about whether or not somebody was going to take advantage of you, because he was going to be there right beside you when you went through it. He really was a coach on the floor for you too. You could tell then that he was going to be a good coach. He'd make some adjustments on the floor with the players that were on the court at the time that the coaches didn't even call. So that was always nice to be able to be with him and ask him what you think about something, and how would you handle this? And he'd go right out and tell you. It may not have always been right, but he certainly let you know how he felt about it.
I want to talk about facilities, and you've been able to be around WVU athletics ever since you stopped playing basketball at WVU. From a facilities aspect, you were there whenever in one of the first few years the Coliseum had opened, and you were able to play there for 4 years. From the time that you got there, from the last time you saw the facilities today, just talk about the infrastructure. How has it changed? Do you think this has brought in new people into the program, player and coach wise? Just sort of walk me through the facilities aspect of WVU.
Well, one thing that I do regret is that I never got to play a game in the old field house down off of Beechurst. The house that Jerry built. Jerry built the other one too, the Coliseum. But it had so much tradition about it that I kind of wish that I was able to have played in there. But the Coliseum, when Red Brown, who was the athletic director during the time the Coliseum was built, he says, I want a building that is built to play basketball, to have basketball, not just another facility. This is going to be a basketball building. And it still looks great to be the age that it is now, 50 some years old. And, the new practice facility that the men and the women have is just unbelievable. And I can't imagine a kid going into the facility, that practice facility out there, looking at it and saying, maybe not. No, I want to be here. And Bob has done a great job of building a locker room for former players, which keeps bringing those guys back. And I think that you can't go wrong when you do stuff like that, because it helps with recruiting. If Kevin Jones is someplace and there's a player around him that's really good, he's going to say, hey, take a look at this place, take a look at the coach, and look at the tradition and see if this isn't the right place for you. So the facilities, the Coliseum is still in great shape. They've got new seats coming in this year and that type of thing. And that practice facility, they're second to none. So you have to be impressed with that. And I think that does help tons with recruiting.
You brought up the field house, and I would feel guilty if I did not ask a question about the field house, because did you because I saw where you got your undergraduate in physical education. Now, did you take classes in the field house?
Yes. Yeah, they were glad. The field house was still active. The ROTC was there, and a lot of the physical education and health classes were down there. So we did. It was still certainly a usable facility. Obviously, they didn't play basketball in there, but we used to go down during the winter and practice in the old field house. So you kind of get a feel of what it was like. But I can't imagine what it was like when Jerry West was playing in that place. People were hanging from the rafters. I've heard a lot of stories about that, and I did not have the opportunity to go up before the field house closed, but I would have loved to have seen the game in there.
Another instrumental piece of West Virginia University is the PRT. Now, I know this is a basketball podcast, and we're talking about infrastructure right now and facilities and stuff like that, but the PRT actually first started running in 1972, and everybody knows that nowadays it breaks down more often than ever, it seems like. What was the PRT like whenever you were in Morgantown?
Yeah, it was a new thing, and it broke down a ton then too. It got old using the excuse that the PRT broke down, but the instructors knew it, because getting from Evansdale downtown, a lot of times you had to take it either that or ride a bus, and the PRT did break down quite a bit. One thing about the PRT, after I finished my undergrad, I became a concrete finisher. And I worked on the second phase of the PRT, the one that goes up to the med center and that type of thing. So, there's a soft spot in my heart for the PRT, because I saw what kind of work went into that. I also worked on the new football stadium too as a concrete finisher. So that was very nice, because I made enough money there to go to grad school without having to take out any loans or anything like that. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get a construction job, but I did work on the PRT. And if it breaks down tomorrow, please don't blame me. I've been going a long time.
I'll make sure not to, especially with classes starting back up. I'll make sure your name is not mentioned.
Okay.
But continuing this discussion with basketball, and I love, you mentioned earlier how the Coliseum and that venue is one of the greatest places you've ever played basketball in. Aside from that, bring in the fan base aspect of WVU. Everybody knows that it's loud, rowdy, and wild today, but what was it like back then for you playing in front of a very passionate fan base?
It was loud and rowdy then too. They used to really mock the other coaches. I remember John Chaney coming in there and they, having little Chaney faces up and everything. But it's a very passionate fan base. And I think that a lot of the students that are there now are there because their parents went there and they just have picked up where the parents left off when it came to being passionate about, about the sport. And the other thing too, Taylor, about it is that West Virginia doesn't have any pro teams. We are West Virginia's pro team. So everybody, and I say that with all respect to Marshall, but people consider West Virginia as their pro team when they think about it. So I think that energetic vibe that you get with the people out there is genuine because it is what we consider our pro team.
So I want to do something that I've done before on this podcast, and that's word attribution. So whenever I say a word, for example, if I were to say basketball, you just give me like a short phrase or just what it means to you. So we'll do a couple of them. So we'll start with basketball. Whenever I say the word basketball, what comes to mind for you?
It just in one word, my education, or two words, my education. Basketball got my education paid for.
When you think of West Virginia University, what comes to mind?
Tradition. You always hear proud to be a Mountaineer. Yes, proud. I'm up just outside of Pittsburgh. I live in Canonsburg, and there's not a day that goes by for the most part that I don't have some type of West Virginia stuff on. And you would be surprised the number of cars with the little WVU emblems on the back. And I go in the store and somebody will come up and say, "Hey, West Virginia, I went there," So the tradition, I think, is huge when you talk about West Virginia University, and proud to be a Mountaineer, yes.
Okay, whenever I say basketball in West Virginia, what comes to mind for you?
Jerry West, tradition. West Virginia's reputation as a basketball program is really, really well respected. So I think when you say West Virginia and basketball, Jerry West comes to mind first. You don't become the logo for nothing. And then you think about the tradition that the program has had, and Huggins has done a good job of keeping that going.
Okay, and lastly, whenever I say Greenbrier East, what comes to mind?
Home. I'm prejudiced because I keep telling people, I used to tell people when I was teaching at Fairmont State that Greenbrier County was the prettiest county in the state. And I still feel like that. And even though my parents are deceased now, we still have our house in White Sulphur. My sister and I don't want to give that up. I'll go back to Greenbrier County all the time and do anything I need to help the people in Greenbrier County.
You mentioned how you became a teacher at Fairmont State. And looking back at that, how beneficial was that for you just to become a professor at another university?
Well, I think my graduate degree is in counseling, and I think that helped me immensely in the classroom with students, being able to understand where they might be coming from, that type of thing. I really, really, in fact, when I heard about all the everything going virtual, I said, I don't know if I could do it, because I loved the interaction with kids in the classroom. It was very, very rewarding to me. From where I live here in Canonsburg to Fairmont State was an hour and 20 minutes every day, one way. And it did never bother me to drive. People will come from Fairmont and say, "How in the world did you do that on a daily basis?" I said, "You know what? It was fine." I've told people too, as I left Fairmont, if I had a bad day in class, which was rare, but if I had a bad day at the office, by the time I got to Waynesburg, it was all out the window. It was done. So I didn't bring a lot of issues home with me. I really, really enjoyed that. And I really think my counseling background helped a lot with that.
I want to also bring up your coaching experience as well, because you coached at North Marion High School and you were named the NCAC Coach of the Year twice. Now, when you look back at your career with the Huskies, what was that like for you?
Eye-opening. We weren't very good the first year that I was there, and it was difficult because I wasn't teaching at the school. I was teaching at Fairmont State, and I wanted to see what my players did at 9 o'clock in the morning or at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. not just when I walked on the court. So it was a very difficult transition from time to time, simply because you really didn't know whether they were having a bad day, whether somebody was in trouble, whether somebody, I came out one day to a game, and I'm looking around. Chris Freeman, who is the head coach at North Marion right now, said, "Where's Chris?" "Oh, he got suspended today because he got in a fight." I didn't even know that. I didn't know it till I got to the game that evening that Chris wasn't going to be there. So those are things that, had I been, in the facility around the clock, would have helped. So the players were great. I really enjoyed the faculty and everybody there. They all supported me, but it was a very difficult deal not being around the players on a daily basis.
You've been able to be a counselor, a teacher, and a coach as well, and you've been working with a lot of young people and young adults as well. When you look back at all this experience that you've had with young adults, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give to somebody?
Go after your dreams. Don't tell someone that you can't do it. You need to go out and you need to attempt it and work at it. And then if it doesn't work out, then you can say, okay, I did try that. So, dream big and go after those dreams, but, be realistic. And if it doesn't work out for you, it doesn't work for you, but don't put it on the back burner because someone else told you that you couldn't do it.
And then lastly, I'll end on this. What's the biggest thing that you've learned from working with young adults?
They are all different. They talk about, you hear some people say, I treat all my players the same. Actually, you really can't do that. You have to kind of know the personality of the kids, what buttons to push, what buttons not to push, and see if you can't mold those people together as one unit. But I've learned that people have different situations that they come from, and a lot of times those situations not having to do with sports may affect what happens to them while they're on the floor doing some of these sports, and you need to be respectful and understanding about that.
Well, Warren, I appreciate your time. It was very nice to talk with you. You brought a lot of great stories, and quite frankly, this was a great episode just from a story aspects. You were filled with them, so I appreciate that.
Well, that's not a problem, Bill. I enjoyed doing it. One quick last thing, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I had Coach Bobby Bowden, for class, and Coach Bowden just passed here this past week, and it was funny. I had class with Coach Bowden, and he never taught us one thing, because what would happen, we would get him on a story about a player or something, and he would talk to the entire class about this playing, how he recruited him, and then the next day we'd go into class and he would start something. We'd say, "Coach, you didn't finish that story on so and so yesterday," and off he'd go again. So daily, we'd bring up a new player or a new guy, and he would every day continue to talk. I still don't even know what the class was, but it was one of those things. And he was such a great man, and I just hated to hear about his passing the other day. But that was a funny thing about us always getting him off track and having him tell stories.
What a great way to end this. I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome, Warren. I appreciate you sharing that with me and everybody, quite frankly. But again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it yet again.
Okay, Taylor, no problem.
Thank you. And that will conclude episode 57 of Hoops Across the Mountain State with our terrific guest, Warren Baker. And this will conclude episode 59. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and just keeping up to date with everything else going on, because the next episode, for episode 60, we're bringing back CJ Harvey, and we're talking about the history of West Virginia University basketball. We just had Warren. Now we're going to go much bigger. Let's go full scale, and we'll have another terrific guest playing for that. And I'll catch you all next time on episode 60 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Thank you all for listening, and stay safe.